I want to show you this Tower 250 case by Thermaltake. Now I've got this case with me in the Hydrangea Blue color. It also does come in black. It comes in white, which Thermaltake is calling snow. And then currently it looks like it comes in the matcha green color as well. I don't see any of the other colors for the 250 out there, but it's very possible by the time you're watching this, the other colors will be available. There's some other cool stuff that Thermaltake is doing. If you look at all of the Tower series cases by Thermaltake, it's getting a little bit bunched up on the bottom end of the stack here. And I think it's just important to talk about why the Tower 250 case and kind of what sets it apart from all of the other cases. So let's talk about the Tower 100 case here. Now this is the first Tower case I think that I did a video on, and overall this is a very cool looking little case in my opinion. There's really nothing about it that I don't like. It is a little limited on the cooling options. This case only offers you 3 fan locations, one on the power supply cover, one in the back, and one on the top. And really you can only get one AIO in here, or radiator, and really it's just 120 millimeters. Really in every way, shape, and form, the Tower 250 improves upon all those specifications. So way more cooling options in the Tower 250, increased specifications across the board, you know, longer graphics cards you can put in here, which we'll go over all those specs in just a minute. So next up, we've got the Tower 200 case, which is obviously a bit bigger than the Tower 250. Now this was the next case to come out after the Tower 100. Now the Tower 200 obviously improved all of the cooling capabilities. It also offered much better specifications as far as like your graphics card and power supply length and things like that. Now as far as just a generic comparison to the Tower 250, this has less capability as far as like the number of fans. The Tower 200 does offer better specifications as far as like graphics card length, and again we'll get into all the specs here in just a minute. But other than the graphics card length, the Tower 250 does offer up to a 360 millimeter radiator, which the Tower 200 did not. So despite the size discrepancy, the Tower 250 offers a little bit better cooling performance, a larger overall radiator, but maybe a little bit less like on the VGA length. So obviously one of the things you'll want to take into consideration is the specification for these cases and match it up to the graphics card that you're going to put in there. Make sure it'll fit. But overall, I really like the Tower 200. Now the Tower 100 was Mini-ITX only. The Tower 200 is billed as Mini-ITX only, even though I did that video and proved that you could put a micro ATX board in here. It's just not on the official supported list, and I've read a couple of comments where maybe there were some issues with cooling performance when a micro ATX board was in there. But regardless, you could get a micro ATX in there. The Tower 250 is Mini-ITX only. You're not going to get a micro ATX board in here. Now it goes without saying that one of the big differentiators with the 250 and the 200 and even the 100 is this octagonal design, which is very unique. It looks very cool in my opinion. Not everybody's going to agree with that. Some people won't like it. That in turn offers the horizontal stand, which the Tower 100 and 200 don't have that. Last but certainly not least, I've got the Tower 300 case, and as you can see in comparison to the 250, it is bigger, and it's bigger kind of in every dimension. Now the Tower 300 has better capabilities in almost every department. Now the Tower 300 does officially support micro ATX this time, and it does support the reverse connector motherboards. I did a video on putting the Project Zero board in here. Offers a little bit more in the cooling department, about the same number of fans, a little bit larger overall AIO, and the Tower 300 will let you put a larger graphics card in here. So with all that capability, it's just a bigger case. That's the trade-off here. But overall, these two cases are very identical. They both kind of look the same. Obviously, the 250 is just a little bit smaller. The 300 being bigger just offers some additional capabilities. The 250 is Mini-ITX only, so if you're looking for micro ATX, you want to step up a little bit, and you like this form factor, the 300 is what you want to do. But if desk space is slightly limited and you don't maybe need all of the extra cooling and the graphics card length of this one, and you like the smaller form factor, because this is a very cool looking case, then maybe consider the Tower 250. So let's talk real quick about the one unique feature of a Tower case, and in my opinion, kind of what makes it a Tower case. And really that's the orientation of the motherboard. So on a normal standard case, the motherboard, the I/O ports are facing the rear. So, you put it on your desk, the I/O ports are in the back. What the Tower series cases have done is they've taken that motherboard and they've rotated it 90 degrees so that the I/O ports are sitting on the top. But once the I/O ports are facing the top, what it allows you to do is to go ahead and just kind of present this in a completely different form factor. Hence you have the Tower case, which just presents itself straight on, as opposed to what you would consider maybe a more traditional mid-tower case. Now, because you've got the I/O ports at the top and you're displaying this kind of in a forward-facing orientation, the one downside to this, and it's a con for some people, for me, it's not too bad, but it has caused me some frustration a little bit, even on the Tower 500, which is easier to get into than the 250 and the 300 for that matter. But looking around the back here, you really don't have I/O ports, but where your cables are going to come through is this little opening here at the top. But if you need to get into this PC often, it can be a hassle to get this off and get the fans out of the way, and doing that live, you know, you've kind of got to cable it up in anticipation of that. Again, I'll show you this all in detail. So a bit of a con, maybe. For me, overall, it's a worthwhile trade-off. It hasn't bothered me really that much, but there has been a couple of times trying to get a little USB stick or something, you know, in the back of the motherboard there, and it's been a little bit frustrating. But let's go ahead and start here. We will need to get this cover off to gain access to the top fans, which in turn will give us access to all of the I/O ports and the cabling and, you know, your HDMI port and so on. Now the top cover is mostly plastic, but there is a metal mesh material on the top here, and that's where your filter material is going to sit into. But to get the top cover off, it's easy to do. There's no screws, no tools required. There are just some posts in here that are kind of compression fit into the chassis itself. But basically you just want to put your hand in here and just give it a firm tug. I usually just kind of give it a good jerk and it will come right off. Sitting in here is the filter material. Basically it's got a little clip here. Take that off, clean it, put it back on. Now looking at the top here, this is where you're going to gain access to the two top mounted fans. Thermaltake has supplied you with two to get started. These are TT1225 fans. It's kind of just a basic fan, but it works well enough. These are just white in color. You can get on the Thermaltake website and buy Hydrangea Blue fans if you want to kind of match everything. I will leave links in the description below to all these products so you can go check that out. Now the fans in the top, these are not RGB fans, but they are 4-pin PWM controlled fans. So you can use your motherboard or your favorite fan controller or whatever to control them. They do just kind of use this daisy chained cable so that you can kind of connect them both together. And then you get quite a bit of length here to get back to your motherboard or controller. In fact, this should be more than adequate for anything in this case. Now, in order to get to your I/O ports on your motherboard, you do need to remove these top fans, and these are mounted to a fan bracket. The bracket is secured with 2 thumb screws. Again, it's pretty tight from the factory, so loosen that up. Once you loosen those 2 fans, you can just lower it down. There's just 2 little clips down here on the side, and then you can remove this. So you could cable manage these top fans so that while the system was on, you could kind of remove this and maybe set it aside and get access into your I/O. Or you could just power your system off and gain access that way. You'll have to kind of decide that before you start building, in this case, of how do you want to access it. But that is a consideration before you purchase any of the tower cases. Now on the top bracket, there's only support for 120 millimeter fans, and 2 at that. So 220 millimeter fans, and that's it. You're not going to get 140 up here, and you really can't put a radiator here because you need to get access to your graphics card right here, and all your motherboard AIO is going to be right here. Basically, your cables are going to come out of that, and then you're going to fish it up through this hole, and then through these 2 holes in the top here, and then out that cover through the top. So that's the trade-off for having your I/O at the top and having your case in this orientation, is you got to find a way to fish these cables out through the top, and this is their solution. Overall, I don't need to get into my case all that often, but you know, I do have some external drives in the USB, and it can be a hassle if you need to get in here. But if you don't need to get in here every day and you don't need to mess with it, it's not a big deal. You set it up the first time, you are good to go. If you need to get access to those USB ports, or you need to be plugging and unplugging things, you know, put a USB hub or put some extension cables on here. There's ways to mitigate the frustration here. But again, just take this into consideration before buying this case. Now your I/O panel is also here on the top, and obviously you've got your power reset button, headphone, microphone jack, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and 1 USB 3.2 port. This is a removable block. There's 2 screws here, so you can take this out. But once you get those 2 screws out, you can remove the I/O block. Your cables are just kind of routed down through this hole, and there's some cable management clips over here to kind of get them down through the back in this back channel. Now moving on, let's go ahead and get the back cover off here. Now there is a magnetically attached filter material here. You can take this off, you can clean it, put it back on. But to get the rear cover off, there's just a little lip at the top, just kind of pull out. There's some posts here that are just, again, compression fit into the chassis, and you can just lift it off. And once you get the back cover off, it's got room for 2 fans here, either 2 120 millimeter fans or 2 140 millimeter fans. The holes are already here. You just need to screw them in and you are ready to go. Now looking on the inside here, they've attached a box of accessories, which we'll talk about here a little bit later. Now the next part we want to talk about is the drive sled. It's mounted right here in the back by a single thumb screw. I've noticed that these thumb screws usually are beyond hand tight for me. So I've usually got to use a screwdriver the first time to get them loosened up. Once you've loosened the thumb screw, then it's just kind of clipped in by 2 clips. You can go ahead and remove that out. Now on the drive sled, you get support for 2 2.5-inch SSDs, or you can do a single 3.5-inch hard drive. Now I will warn you, if you do a 3.5-inch hard drive, you're going to interfere with the fans on the back of this. The only way you could possibly do it is if your hard drive's a little bit slimmer, and maybe if you use slim fans. So when I've got a fan on here into the drive cage, when I'm looking down through the holes, in my opinion, there's not enough room for a 3.5-inch drive in there. If you're going to put a 3.5-inch drive in there, maybe slim fans would help, or you'll have to compromise and use less fans. But that's been the situation on all the other tower cases that I've looked at. This back drive cage here and these fans, it's just too tight. But if you choose to use 2.5-inch SSDs, it's not a problem. It should fit just fine. There is a discussion to be had as to whether that might obstruct some airflow, but it should fit. Now down here on the bottom, obviously, is your power supply mounting bracket. The Tower 250 supports and includes the brackets for both SFX and ATX power supplies. Now, if you're not familiar with the SFX form factor, it's just a PC power supply, just much smaller. And you can find modern SFX power supplies with much higher wattages and all of the bells and whistles. I don't think there's really any performance difference. You'll just have to check out each individual power supply and make a good decision. But as you can see here, the SFX power supply definitely does add some additional room in the bottom of this case. So if you've got a lot of additional components and accessories that you need to get stuffed into this case, consider an SFX power supply. It should work pretty good. The maximum power supply length is rated at 200 millimeters. The bracket itself is removable if you need to get in there and do some custom builds or modifications, things like that. There's 4 screws on the bottom. I'll show you that in just a second. You can get this cage out of here. Now, as far as cable management goes, one big advantage to the octagonal design is it has these little channels here on the 2 sides, one over on the left, one over on the right. And it's got these little cable management clips here. They're just kind of flexible pieces of plastic that just kind of hold cables up into these channels here. That has really made cable management easy for me when I'm building in these cases. Now the Tower 600, and I'll show some B-roll of that here, they put some removable panels in here. The Tower 300 didn't have a removable panel here, but the Tower 600 did. It was just a little magnetic piece, and you could remove it out and you could get access to all of this. Now, unfortunately, those are not here on the Tower 250, but this doesn't support rear connector motherboards, so it's not really a big deal in my opinion. Obviously, tucked in the back here are all your cables for the front panel. They are in white, so they look pretty good. There's quite a bit of length here. I can't imagine you'll have any problems with the length of these cables getting back to your motherboard. Now, over on the right side of the case, this is where your fans and AIOs and radiators are going to be installed. And to gain access to this, to install them, is going to be easy to do. It's just a little lip here at the top. Go ahead and give it a little bit of a pull. This comes out. It's held in by a kind of a little clip down here at the bottom. And basically just pull that out, and you can just wiggle it and lift it off, and it comes right off. Now there is filter material on the inside of this. Basically there's just a little lip here in the top corner. Go ahead and lift that up and it just pops right out. You could clean it, tuck it right back into the little grooves here, and it just clips right back in. We've got some magnets on here to hold it into the case. Installation is just the reverse. There's just a little lip down here on the bottom. You want to kind of latch that into the bottom of the case, and then it just pops right back in. Now the next piece we encounter is the mounting bracket for both your fans and your AIOs. There's just 2 screws here at the top. These are not thumb screws. You will need a screwdriver to remove those. But once those screws are removed, it just lifts right out. Now there are 2 little feet here at the bottom that just engage in some holes in the bottom of the case. Basically, you just set them down in those holes, put it back in, you can screw this back in. But once you get this out, you can mount your radiator and your fans on this right side. Now the cooling options on the right-hand side are up to 320 millimeter fans, or you can get 2 140 millimeter fans. Radiator support on the right-hand side is up to a 360 millimeter radiator or a 280 millimeter radiator. Now, obviously, if you're doing a 360 millimeter radiator, this space down here in the bottom is going to be taken up. So it can get a little bit tight down here, but just be aware there's no drive mounting locations or anything down here in the basement. Now in the front, we do have 3 separate glass panels, and during shipping, they did kind of tape these together a little bit. So be mindful of that when you're first kind of trying to get this apart. I did have to take a razor blade and kind of cut that tape right there. Otherwise, when you pull this out, you might yank some of the others out. Should be all right, but just use caution your first time. Everything is protected by film from the factory. You'll want to remove that when you're all done with your build, and it will look really good. Now the center glass can be removed at any time. You just push on the center at the top here, and it kind of just disengages. You just push it to lock it, push it again to unlock it, and then you can kind of pull it out. But basically, there's just a little lip here, sets on the case, push it in, and you can lock it back in. Now to get the side glass off, you just want to kind of give it a firm tug. There's just pins at the top and the bottom, the compression fit pins that kind of hold it in place. Basically, you can just grab it, kind of pull it off. It's not in there very tight, so you can just remove that. Same with the other piece. And it's got the Hydrangea Blue bezel painted on here. That'll come in whatever color case you order it. Now that will give you full access to inside the case to start doing your build, do maintenance, and whatever else you need to do. Now on the left side of the case, we have the same exact construction as we have over here on the right. Basically, this panel can be removed. Little lip at the top, go ahead and pull it. It's magnetically attached. Just wiggle it off and lift it off the lip there at the bottom. But again, you can take the filter material out, clean it, lock it back into place, and you are ready to go. Now on the left-hand side, there is no fan mounting bracket because your graphics card is going to be right here, so there's going to be really no room for fans or radiators. However, the fan mounting bracket will fit over here. Just sits down in the bottom and fits right here. And it fits perfectly. You can put the screw holes in. If you're going to be doing modifications or changing things around, you want to get creative. This fan bracket does fit over here. It just doesn't come with it. Now, looking on the inside of the case, we've got full access to it now. Obviously, this is Mini-ITX motherboards only. There's not room in here for micro ATX, and there's no holes to put standoffs or anything like that. So you will be restricted to Mini-ITX. If you're going to choose to do air cooling in this, the maximum CPU heat sink height is 210 millimeters. So again, just check all your equipment, make sure it matches up to the specifications for this case. So one thing I want to point out to you is in the motherboard I/O area, and this was the same way on the Tower 300. None of the other Tower cases are like this, but in the motherboard I/O area, there's no cover here. So, you know, normally when you install a motherboard, you put the I/O shield on, and then, you know, you either put it into the back of the case, or in the Tower series cases, most of them, you put it up in and there's some covers there. So it covers all your cables and USB sticks and all of that, and it looks nice. Well, in the Tower 300 and the Tower 250 here, there's no cover here at all. It's just your bare motherboard. So you can see all the cables coming in. You can see all of your USB sticks, etc. Whatever you got plugged in here, you're going to see. And you can also see your HDMI and DisplayPort cables coming into this area. I do want to point out, initially in the Tower 300 video, I didn't think I was going to like this very good. My initial impression was, this is kind of going to suck. I wish there was something here to cover all of this up. When I got the build done, and I'd taken a little bit of time to kind of manage it properly, and I'd bought one of these little fancy lighted USB sticks and kind of put it in there, tried to dress it up and make it look nice. The end result was something that I kind of liked it more than I thought I would. At least I didn't hate it. And it really wasn't that big of a detraction. So just be aware that this area is open here, because I can imagine some folks really are just going to hate that. Some of the comments in that other video, I think there were people that just didn't like the fact that there was no cover here. I'd even talked about maybe 3D printing or, you know, fashioning something to cover this up, which would be a little more difficult than it looks. But depending on the motherboard you have, I think if you take your time in this area, it will look okay. That's my personal opinion. If you don't like it, you're probably going to be skipping over this case because it's going to stand out to you. There's plenty of holes all the way around to get cables in and out of here. You got a couple of cables on this power supply cover, which we'll remove here in just a second. The graphics card, there's 3 expansion slots here at the top. Again, these are thumb screws here, and the covers are pre-installed. Now, the case technically does have 3 PCI expansion slots, but only the first 2 have covers on it. As you can see here, the third one, it does have the screw so that you can mount to it, but it kind of overhangs the edge of the shroud here. Just be aware of that from an aesthetic standpoint, that if you have a very large graphics card, it might overhang the edge of the shroud here a little bit. Now, the graphics card length specification, if you have the power supply cover in place, which I'll show you in just a second, the maximum length is 245 millimeters. If you take that cover off, you can get up to a 360 millimeter graphics card. So before buying this case, you will want to make sure that your graphics card will fit. Now, there is a little pad over here on the side, so if your graphics card is going to protrude down into this area, it's got a little pad right here to protect that. Inside the accessory box is this power supply cover. Let's go ahead and get it out and we'll test fit it. And basically what there is just a little hook on the top, and there's be a couple tabs here in the back. You just want to kind of fit those in, fit the tabs in the back, and then kind of lock that down. And it's kind of angled and beveled to fit the styling of the case. It looks pretty good. It's plastic and not metal, but that's where that cover is. It's got some holes here to get some cables up through, obviously, and then you just pull this little tab up and the cover comes out. Now, the power supply cover here can be removed. There's some holes in the back here to get cables up into here. This will support a 120 millimeter fan or a 140 millimeter fan. It's got markings on here for the screw holes. but there's 2 screws in the front and 2 screws in the back. Let's go ahead and get those removed. Then there's just 2 screws in the back here to take out. Now there's no functional requirement to have this plate in. It probably does give the case some rigidness, but if you're doing custom builds, mods, things like that, you could certainly take this out and do whatever you want to do. But once you get those screws out, the plate just basically lifts out. You can clean it, you can mount your fan to it, obviously, and just put it back in. Now that just gives you total access to everything down here in the basement. The front panel here, let's talk about that. You can remove that. And I find sometimes if I'm doing maintenance or during the build, it's kind of nice to get your hand up in here and to get access to your power supply connectors. So to get the front filter out, there is a little magnet that holds it into position here, but basically you just want to kind of pull it down straight from the bottom. My tendency initially was to kind of bend this filter out and pull it out from the clips, but I think I kind of bent the filter a little bit. I can fix that, but just be careful getting that filter out. Now in the accessory box, they are including the other cover here. This other panel is if you're going to use the LCD panel from Thermaltake, but should you already have the LCD panel, you don't need to go buy the panel. You can just mount it to this, and then that would connect right up. Now, after I installed the front panel for the Thermaltake LCD panel, I really didn't like the look initially. So as you can see, the holes are not cut out. They're just kind of mimicking the same style as the holes in the rest of the panel, but they're just a solid piece of metal here. When you're first looking at it, it doesn't seem like any big deal. And of course, there's no filter material behind here. It just kind of jumped out to me. I really didn't love the look of how they did this. It just kind of stands out like a sore thumb a little bit. I just kind of wish they would have found a way to cut out some holes here and put a little bit of filter material behind it. But let me know what you think in the comments. It might just be me. Now on this corner and this corner, there is filter material behind it. It's just kind of clipped in, kind of tight. You kind of have to work it past all these clips. Once you get that out, you can clean those and you can put them back in. But let's look at the very bottom of the case. There is a filter here. You can just remove this. There's a little lip here. You can remove this even while it's upright. Go ahead and pull that off. From here, we get access to the screws that hold this power supply cage in place. So let's go ahead and remove those. But once you get those 4 screws out, the power supply mounting cage comes out. I don't think generally there's going to be much reason to remove this. But again, it's cool that it comes out. If you're going to be doing modifications, custom installations, you want to clean everything really good. The only other thing to really remove on here are the bottom feet. Again, modifications for cleaning, things like that. It's nice that they come off. But if you're going to use the horizontal stand kit, you're going to need to remove both feet. The bottom replacement piece is going to fit just over the top of this, but the feet need to be off of there. So also in the box is a speaker, a bunch of zip ties, all the screws that you need to mount your motherboard, power supply, etc. There's some replacement plastic clips, where the front glass and everything kind of pops in here. The clips that hold the front glass in place, they're just kind of compressed into the frame itself. So if they happen to break, Thermaltake has included some replacements for you. They do give you some Velcro material for cable management and things like that. But that is what is in the accessory box. That's pretty much everything you need. The case also does come with a pretty good instruction manual. Overall, I found the quality and the fit and finish of the Tower 250 to be right on par with the other tower cases from Thermaltake. It's kind of a premium case, so everything seems to be well done on it. There's no sharp edges, and everything seems to be lined up and properly installed. But overall, I think the Tower 250 is a great addition to the Tower series cases. Especially if you like this octagonal design, you want to mount it horizontally. This fits right in there in this small mini tower form factor. But I will come back and do another video and show you my build experiences in it and go over some of the temperature results that I get out of it. My anticipation is with the hardware that I'm going to put in, I'm going to have absolutely no problems building in it. As long as the case will house the cooling components that you need for your hardware, I don't anticipate there's going to be a lot of cooling issues with this. And I can anticipate that just like the other tower cases, it's going to look great on the bench. I think from a visual aesthetic, there's absolutely no problem with this. This case looks really cool. I will put some affiliate links. You can check out all these products in the description below. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button. But that is going to wrap it up for today. Thanks for watching.